Hi friends, and welcome to this month's Q&R. I'm not sure if you'll be seeing this in July or in August of 2019, but we'll get it out as soon as we can. Quick note that next month we will be doing the Facebook Live feature and do a live video with questions instead. However, if you put your questions in here below, I'll be starting with some of those, so sort of as people take some time usually when you do a Facebook Live to hop on and start asking questions. I'll, rather than have dead air, I'll answer some of your questions. So they will not be lost if you ask your questions now. I was also told to do a blanket disclaimer about butchering all of the name pronunciations rather than apologizing every time, so that made a lot of sense to me. As you might not have noticed, I'm not a professional broadcaster. I'm just trying to figure this out as I go along, so I expect to do most everything wrong at first. Now I'm just going to jump in. I think we have a number of writing-related ones, but also some other fun ones today. So Bob Shellington from YouTube says, who's your favorite villain you've written, and why is it the Color Prince? I like your style, Bob. I don't know that the Color Prince is my favorite villain. I've done a lot of work in this series with a character that I kind of tend to think of as not quite an anti-hero, but maybe an anti-villain who I've been very proud of. And I think you'll get to see a lot more of him in the coming pages. So the Color Prince has been hard to be a favorite because we simply don't spend that much time with him. With the constricted time, I haven't been able to get in his shoes quite as much to really come to fall in love with him. So I'm just going to leave it there. I'm sure you guys can guess what I'm talking about. Ashley Marasco says, I'm writing to you today to ask a question about writing. I'm on my second manuscript, and I was wondering how you deal with keeping true to reality, i.e. physics and the known effects of certain phenomena, etc., versus making something sound freaking cool. For example, hold on, I put my pages in the wrong order. Lightning, physics tells us it strikes the ground anywhere near you, you're going to receive a really bad shock. But wouldn't it look cool for a character to make it strike in front of an enemy to intimidate them but not kill them or put them in the hospital? I'm writing fantasy, so there's leeway. How true to reality do you have to stick? So a couple things here. It is fantasy, and so you do not have to stick close to reality at all. What you have to do is you have to obey the rules that you set up, and hopefully you set those rules up early on. You establish the rules of your universe. This is kind of how things work in my world. Either the magic is really hard-edged and it totally follows scientific principles, or the magic is soft and it's just very mysterious. We have no idea how it works. It just does cool stuff all the time. Or, and magic is common or magic is rare. You kind of decide what that is, and then you just have to obey those rules. So you could have, magical lightning do whatever the heck you want it to do. It doesn't have to act like real lightning. It's totally up to you. It has its own rules. However, I should note that like firearm safety, if you're calling lightning from a bolt from the clear blue sky, which actually can happen because lightning can strike up to I think I read 50 miles away from where you're standing, so you can actually have lightning strike out of a blue sky. Imagine trying to aim that with any degree of accuracy. Basically, like firearm safety, I don't think you should point a gun at anybody and and have your finger on the trigger, or even point a gun at anybody at all. You don't want to do stuff if you're not willing to kill people. So, or if somebody is being reckless, you might want to show how that's a bad idea. Kind of do the Pulp Fiction thing. Anyway, so yeah, that's my answer. You don't have to stay true to reality at all. You have to stay true to the reality of your made-up universe. Isaac Marcus says, from YouTube, says, I've actually got two different questions. What's the farthest you've ever backtracked to change something upon realizing how big of an impact it would have later in the story? Two different ways to answer this. In my first series, I had the delight of writing all three books before I got a book deal, so which totally sucked, by the way. But the good thing about writing all three books before I got them published was that book one wasn't published when I was, 3/4 of the way through book three, and I had an idea of how to tie things together. So I finished all three books. I went back and did things like I wrote the first chapter of the Night Angel trilogy, of The Way of Shadows, actually after I completed all the books. I was able to go back and change that. I was able to change other little things in order to tie things together. It's to sort of make some really, I did some really subtle hints at what was coming. I was able to hide some exposition in different ways. I was able to plant some big plot twists in ways that I thought would be really fun. So sort of 4 or 5 years, depending on how you want to count it. The other way I could answer that is with Lightbringer, I've been on more of a traditional schedule. That is, I publish a book, it's out there. Once it's out there, you have to deal with it. And in this case, with The Burning White, I actually, at one point, and this was really terrible, I had to backtrack about 6 months, and basically I did not delete all of the events that happened in those 6 months, but I decided that we didn't need to see all of those happen in real time, that it screwed up the pacing of some of the other characters' plot lines. When you're dealing with multiple characters, you're trying to move them along chronologically, hopefully mostly contemporaneously with each other. So, if it's Sunday for one character and you switch to another character, you hope that it's Sunday or very close, or at least that you're not skipping back and forth in really confusing ways as you go. Oh, this character is 2 years ahead of all the other characters. Well, why? Why would you be confusing? So in order to have the plot lines match up nicely, I ended up having to go back and I got rid of a bunch of words, and I condensed them, and now it's sort of like, okay, that happened, but it wasn't super important to the character's growth as a character. It wasn't super important to the development of their plot or their subplot, and so I was able to remove a lot of stuff in order to make the book flow much better and develop more quickly and get moving. So that was no fun at all, and yes, cost me about 6 months. So one of my core values as a writer is that I will do what I need to do, and if it sucks, it sucks, and I just go, you know what? It sucks to throw that away, but it is the best thing for the novel. It's going. And that wasn't just a simple matter of cutting plot events. It was like in all those chapters that I cut, I also had thematic developments. I wove in lots and lots of stuff. It wasn't just like what happens externally. It was like what's happening internally with the characters, some symbolism, some emotional developments between the characters, some internal developments within characters. And so removing that wasn't just like, okay, well, this can just go by the wayside. We don't lose anything. I had to then rework all the other scenes around the scenes that I cut or the scenes that I shortened. Everything had to be reworked, and it was just it was highly labor intensive. But the resulting novel is much stronger. So that's something that I really try to do. I don't like doing it. I don't like realizing I've taken the long way and I should have taken the short way, but it happens. 2L Ranch 227 from YouTube says, I often find some writers have difficulty creating characters that are unique. A new series or book will have a new lead who is eerily similar to a past main character. Do you find creating a new character hard? Do you use unique people in your life to create aspects of your character? I generally don't find it that hard to create new characters. I do find as I go along, and as I've created many more characters over the course of my career, that characters can tend to repeat. It's like, oh, this character is very similar to that one. And depending on how you want to view this, it's like, okay, well, you're dealing with archetype X. Well, these guys are going to have certain things in common, or you have people in similar positions with certain similar personality traits, and you could say, oh, well, they're exactly the same, where they're really not. But what I do hope to do is I hope to make characters who are different from each other. Like, this character would do that in this position, but this other character, he's going to do something totally different, and you can see that from his past and from how he's developed. I find this is one of those things where you have to look at your skills as a writer. If you're a writer, you have to look at your own skills as a writer, and some writers are able to do this really well. Like, it's kind of the same thing or same thing as thinking about actors. Some actors do certain types of characters really, really well, and you just love to hang out with Jim Carrey, right? Like, he's fun, and then Jim Carrey tries to do something more serious, and you're like, Cable Guy, and you're sort of like, I don't like that. Can you just go back to being, the rubber-faced guy who's so hilarious and funny? Or, Arnold Schwarzenegger can only play a certain number of kinds of characters. It's like the accent just isn't going to work for certain things, and that's not really his fault. That's his instrument, and that's his physique. Whereas other characters, a Gary Oldman or Philip Seymour Hoffman, they could really do all sorts of different kinds of characters. They just have a broad range, and that's part of what they bring. That's part of the skill set that they just have. Maybe that's inborn. Probably it's a little bit inborn, and probably it's a lot of work on top of that. So some writers, they can really only do a narrow band of characters well, and if those characters are great, if you like hanging out with those characters, that's totally fine. And like I would say, if you have a really strong voice, and all of your characters are gonna sound the same, and you can't get very far away from that, well then doing things like writing a first person perspective so that you stay with one character and you kind of go where they go, you hear things out of their voice. And if you've got a broader range, doesn't mean you're a better writer. It means you're better at certain kinds of stories, and you're probably worse at other kinds of stories. Maybe you don't get as deep into one kind of character's shoes, or maybe you do both really well. I mean, obviously, if you're an amazingly talented writer, you could do both well. So kind of see what you're good at and be amazing at that, and then also look at what you're not that good at, and try to shore up your weaknesses, but try not to highlight your weaknesses. Okay, that's that one. I think that's far enough with that one. This page, I'm not going to do those. Samantha Glover asks, hold on, how deep am I into this? Okay, I am 14 minutes in, so Samantha Glover, you are going to have to wait for next time. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. I hope you have enjoyed this little thing we put together, and I will see you next month on Facebook Live. I'll make sure that I publicize when and where that is. Eventually, in the comments below, or if you're on YouTube, there will be links below. You can hop directly to the question that interests you most. I hope you find this helpful. Thanks so much.